Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is Lionel Ketchian, and I'm here with George Ortega, and we're here to talk about happiness because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Today we'll be talking about happiness and openness to experience it. So George, this is interesting, happiness and our openness to experience happiness. Now, how does courage fit into that equation?
Yeah, before we get into that, I just want, it's not necessarily, it's not so much about or completely about happiness and our openness to experiencing happiness, but just as our openness to experiencing life.
Okay.
And because that, you know,
so it's about openness.
Right, because like then the courage component fits in very well. It's the idea that like life is about experience, and there are a lot of experiences in life that hold, that contain, that have the promise of great happiness, but they also contain an element of risk. For example, you have a lot of people, let's say, who work, during the day. They get home, they're a little tired,
right,
and the thought of going out, let's say, spending the evening with friends, going out to a coffee shop, a bar, a restaurant, or something, is scary. Maybe they're tired. It's something that being with others is risky. So, like, it takes courage to enter into those experiences, to bring those experiences much more into our lives that hold so much happiness.
Well, I think you're right about that. I think when you talk about risk, you know what word comes up in my mind? Uncertainty. And I think that's what we're really fighting. I don't know if we may think in terms of risk, because risk really means loss. But uncertainty is, gee, I don't know what I'm going to face. And that is where the openness comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think life is uncertain, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a great point, Lionel, because like what happens is like life is very uncertain. We go out, we spend time with people, we don't know how it's going to work out. But then, what are we uncertain about? When we think about it, what's the threat? What's the risk? The risk is that, and this is, very to the point, the risk is we're going to we might feel unpleasant feelings during that time, right? And then it becomes and stays such a great risk, because even though we have that maybe at the back of our minds, we haven't ever worked, we haven't ever been taught to work, we haven't really been taught to consider working on how we overcome those negative feelings that are a risk. For example, like, again, the number one source of happiness for almost all of us is other people. Now, naturally, we all know from experience that when sometimes we spend too much time with other people, the wrong kind of people, whatever, these unpleasant feelings are going to be invited, right? But if we take the time to learn how to enjoy other people more, to learn how to not experience those negative feelings with other people, then it's not even so much about courage, it's about confidence that we don't have to fear, being open to these kinds of experiences, because we'll have prepared ourselves.
Okay, I agree with you. I think the only little tweak I would make is that when you said when we don't when we teach ourselves to not experience negative feelings, I think we can't help but experience them no matter what they are. But it's in dealing with them, I think, that's a difference. In other words, I don't think we can control so much what we experience and how we experience it, but I think we can control how we deal with what we experience.
Yes, and I'll give you an example of this. Because a lot of times it's so simple. Like, I've just spent 6 months working on a new website. I'm going to give it a plug. It's called profitdonationcapitalism.org. And the basic key is to have not-for-profit organizations and philanthropic individuals compete with conventional businesses to so that a lot more money goes into causes. In other words, like, it's encouraging the idea that when we as consumers go shopping, rather than buying products from rich corporations and rich individuals whose profits are going to go to further enriching these corporations and individuals, we can buy products from not-for-profit organizations and companies, for example, like Newman's Own, that will donate all these profits to charity and good causes. All right, so that's the concept. I've spent 6 months compiling information. There's about over like 50 companies that are already doing this that are on the site. I just premiered the site on July 8th. Press release went out on 11th.
Congratulations.
Thanks. But all right, now the thing is, I don't know how effective my presentation is, right? And so there's a bit of fear, right? It's an unpleasant feeling, apprehension. Okay. All right, I recognize that, right? But overcoming that unpleasant feeling is as easy as reminding myself that, hey, I can be completely happy regardless of how successful that promotion is, regardless of how successful that website is. So it's just like, it's just training ourselves. If we want to talk about training ourselves and simplify it completely, it's the idea of simply, whenever we have a negative emotion, shifting our focus, shifting our attention back to our happiness.
Yeah, now, an interesting thing is, when I consider why you've done this website and what your purpose was in doing it, you certainly were not doing it to make money. That's number one. But your real aim and purpose and the meaning behind what you're doing is to assist people who have less than normal people do in the world to have a little bit better life. Where there might be starvation, to aid in a little bit of hunger relief and this kind of thing. So that's your basic purpose in doing this. So you should be proud of that, because I think that's something a lot of people just don't think about. And I think it's a very direct, well-founded concept that if you walk into a supermarket, you could buy a bunch of salad dressings that have name brands, and or you could buy Paul Newman's Own, which now has become a name brand, and support the Hole in a Wall gang, kids with cancer and so forth. So I think it's just a choice. Now we don't just go to the supermarket. Now we're making choices, and I think that kind of awareness is very important, and I congratulate you for it, because you're thinking and you're putting happiness to work, and you're doing what you feel needs to be done. And what you're saying to me is your openness to exposure, to to criticism, to maybe even antagonistic aggression towards you and what you're doing, because profits are profits, and companies like to keep all the money they can make, and they don't want anybody interfering with it. It would be like you going up against the oil companies, for example. But I think it's a wonderful thing when a human being like you comes along and cares about others, because when you really boil it down, you're just expressing your care and concern for others, and if this can make some significant difference for those people, that's why you've spent 6 months doing it.
Yeah, Lionel, and this, I want to get back to openness, but this is important, because the reason I did it is because you have on the planet less, over half the population, over 3 billion people, living on less than $3 a day, less than $3 American dollars. When I say American dollars, that means that they're living on what we here in America can buy with $3 American dollars. It's not like their $3, translates into more in their economies, right? They're, $3 American dollars, which doesn't buy much. So the idea is that, our show is about helping people become happier. And it just dawned on me that in addition to helping people become happier through these skills like, openness to experience, that, while the research shows that above the poverty line, having more money just doesn't matter. It just is so an insignificant effect in happiness. Below the poverty line, it's much more important. So that I think, in a sense of making a happier world, this profit donation capitalism, this projects, helping these poor people to become, to get what they need might actually be perhaps the most effective way of creating a happier world, just through that socioeconomic impact. But yeah, let's get back to the openness thing.
Well, let's face it, our minds love novelties. And when you consider that in the idea of openness to experience, how would you relate that aspect of our mind loving novelty?
Yeah, okay. It's the idea that, our mind does love novelty. Sometimes it's interesting, like sometimes too much stimulation is not good, too little is not good, but novelty is generally desired. But then our mind also loves comfort, and that's the problem, because a lot of times, we would prefer to not be very happy, to be in a comfortable state of not being happy, whatever, than taking the risk, than seeking out this novelty that our mind really craves, really wants, and we're afraid, again, it goes back to the issue of courage. We're afraid to seek that novelty because it has risks. But, again, the idea is like with novelty is like when we expose ourselves to different experiences, different people, different, activities throughout the day, that makes for happiness. That makes for, that brings an openness to our lives that just is very desirable.
About a week ago, I was thinking about comfort, and all of a sudden I got into a whole, evolutionary thought process on comfort. And it seems like as babies, we're motivated by comfort. When we're uncomfortable, especially uncomfortable, we want to get complete again. And so comfort into our adulthood has become a significant aspect of our being. And I think we equate completeness more with our comfort level than with happiness or anything else.
I think you're very right, Lionel. And I think the reason we do this is because as a society, we really haven't provided ourselves with an effective option. Meaning that since our schools aren't teaching happiness, since there aren't any businesses teaching happiness, since our parents, who aren't all that happy themselves, never really taught us happiness, we kind of are concluding that, hey, this unhappiness is pretty inevitable, or this low level of happiness, and so it's just easier, it's more pleasant to accept it than to seek greater happiness. And also, again, since we haven't been taught it, many of us conclude that, it's just not possible, so why, attempt something that's not possible?
Yeah, I think comfort is an aspect of happiness, but it's a very low-level aspect of it, and I think that we just aren't aware enough of how far, we're trying to bargain for the low end when we could get the whole completeness end of it.
That's a good point, because as you're saying, there are different kinds of happiness. There's a happiness we can gain from being comfortable, but I think most of us recognize that being comfortable is just like a compromised happiness. It's not the kind of happiness we really want.
Right, true. What about, you talk about comfort. What about openness to something less than pleasant? What about that? How does openness relate when it comes to the pleasantries of life, or something less than pleasant for us?
Good point. Okay, because that's like, again, let's use the example of other people, because other people really are our main source of happiness. They're such a powerful source of happiness. Again, we avoid what we think may bring us unpleasantness, unpleasant emotions, and people are like, interacting with people does that. It creates while it's very ironic. It's like it's the idea that while it does provide an amazing opportunity for much greater happiness, the most potent one, I think, as a society we have, even though, like, I think we know from the research that there are ways to become very happy that don't have anything to do with people, like meditation and focus and etc. But see, the problem is, like, again, since we have never been taught as a society to overcome, to understand this unpleasantness, the unpleasant experiences, the feelings of unpleasantness, we're going to shy away from them. And unfortunately in life, especially related to other people, what can bring us great happiness in life can also subject us to unpleasantness. So we've got to be open to that unpleasantness in order to reap the benefits of what also can, in that experience create great happiness.
Yeah, I think the word that comes to my mind is acceptance. When you accept, especially the things you can't change, and they may be very unpleasant, and they certainly may not be anything you want, but when you realize you've got them, or you're dealing with them, or you have to deal with them, acceptance can really help, because if you can't change something, letting it make you unhappy is not a good option. So I think remaining open to the things that are unpleasant sounds appears to be crazy, but most people don't accept what they can't change. Now that's even crazier. That's as crazy as you can get. Yet that's pretty much how most people navigate life.
Yeah. Again, openness. I've got to explain something though, because there is kind of like a misconception regarding pain and pleasure in the world. It's kind of like a misconceived ideology or philosophy. Mm-hmm. Some people, a lot of my friends, I talk to happiness, with them, and they say, well, happiness is all right, but it's not everything. I mean, this is funny. This is very funny, because people will say, you've got to be open to all of life experience. You've got to be open to the pain, to the suffering, and all that. All right, fine. Pain and suffering are a part of the world, right? They're part of reality. But that in no way means that we should accept it or value it, unless it, creates greater happiness. In other words, what I'm saying is we're open to situations that cause pain and suffering, because they can also create great happiness. But under no circumstances should we be valuing, encouraging, accepting this pain and suffering just because we interpret it or define it to be a part of life. Yeah, it's a part of life, but again, both biologically, psychologically, spiritually, it's a part of life that is not where we want to be. It's not.
Well, I think we should accept from the point of view that there's night, there's day. This too shall pass. This is something that came along. It can't. Well, it might all be good, but occasionally there could be a few things that happen that are less than what we term good. But not if we can't change them. Don't let them change us. That's the only point I make.
Yeah, but I hear it. But what I'm addressing more is some people will say, well, if your life is completely happy, it's so empty, it's so frivolous. I mean, you need some pain in your life. That is such nonsense.
How would anybody know that in the first place? Because nobody's that happy that we know. That most people who say that aren't working on a happiness regimen to begin with.
It's funny. It's there's also popular sentiment expression that I don't want to be totally happy, because totally happy would be boring. You hear people say that. And I mean, the obvious truth to that is, if it was total happiness, it couldn't in any way be boring, because how could, the happiness is the total antithesis.
But again, you have to experience that to know it. So unless you've experienced total happiness, you can't be the person to talk against it.
Right.
That's the whole point.
And I think the reason people misrepresent, this concept, they kind of advocate an openness to the totality of life, to the pain as well as the pleasure, is, aside from there being positivity in certain pain that we can learn from it, but I think a lot of people kind of encourage that sentiment of just valuing that pain, on its own, because they don't fully understand, appreciate, they haven't fully experienced a life without it.
Right, but what the problem is in what some psychologists refer to as denial. The problem with not accepting pain when you can't do anything about it is, long after the pain is gone or the event is not forgotten but over with, a human being will go on having pain and have suffering years after an event has totally finished and is no longer in, even in reality in any way, but the individual will go on having pain, will go on suffering, all because they didn't handle it right to begin with.
Oh, that's such a good point, Lionel. Such a good point, because this show is about openness to experience. And yes, you're right, pain is going to come into our lives. And a lot of times, we have to be open to a reinterpretation of this pain. And this I can speak about from personal experience. I mean, I once had this toothache, okay, that was really, really painful. And I'm thinking, this sucks, what am I going to do about it? So what I decided to do was, rather than trying to distract myself from the pain, I decided to focus on it, to just focus as strongly and as directly, as specifically on exactly where that pain was, and just have it completely absorb my consciousness. This was amazing. From doing that, the pain lost its unpleasantness.
Yeah.
No, it's total unpleasantness. I was feeling it, but I reinterpreted it. I opened myself to the possibility of sensing it in a way that in a few minutes robbed it of its unpleasantness.
Okay, I agree, and I think it's a good illustration of the fact that when we don't experience things, we're really doing, what most people think is denial is really acceptance. Because again, if you can't change something, going into it fully is real full acceptance, and then or going into it fully and doing something about it. Did you call the dentist up?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so at least you did that. So I believe in making a good choice, and then you're done with it. I mean, you may still have the pain, but you're going to get rid of it at some point. You've done everything you humanly possibly can do. And then, but to continue to suffer, to talk about your experience in a positive way is different than somebody telling me, in your case, where they didn't experience it well, and say, hey, listen, I am really afraid of severe pain. In their whole life, they can't sleep, they can't eat, because all they do is they're led by a fear of having pain. And that can happen to people, because when they don't experience something in the right way, it becomes their master.
Yeah, and again, that's what this show really is about. Because if we want to open up ourselves more to the experiences that hold happiness, that other people, the work of happiness, etc., then we've got to face those fears. We've got to overcome those fears. We've got to have the faith that if we take on these challenges, that life, God, nature will reward us. That idea of no pain, no gain. We do the work and we will be rewarded for it.
How do you feel openness relates to emotional experience? I mean, is this pretty much the story you told me with the dentist? It's an emotional experience. It was pain, but it was pain. But here's my take on it: you had pain, but you disassociated from the emotional aspect of it, and then the pain was lessened.
Yeah, I'm not really sure that basically what I did is I focused on the pain as an experience without judging it. I think it has maybe a bit to do with mindfulness.
Judging.
Yeah,
because it's my feeling that pain can be intensified when you're emotionally attached. In fact, if you're emotionally attached to pain, you take pain and then you create suffering by emotionally attaching to it.
Right, and maybe that comes about by evaluating in a certain way, by judging it to be negative or something.
Right, and I think that's another reason that not getting emotionally invested in pain and just accepting it as a sensation that you're doing something about that may not be pleasant, but this is happening to you now.
Yeah, Lionel, openness to emotional experience has to do with the tendency that many of us have of avoiding emotional experience. For example, a lot of us will spend our lives keeping busy, we jump from one activity to the next, to the next, to the next, because then some of us are afraid that when we'll take the time to not do anything, that's going to invite these feelings that we've been avoiding by keeping busy and all.
Yeah, you know, I think when a psychologist says, when they have the argument about happiness, that, you know, you're in denial of an event, a situation, or pain, I think what they're really saying is it's okay to avoid it. But when people avoid these things, they go to the complete opposite extreme, and they do more harm, because in avoiding something, they're really running away from it, and in happiness, you're really facing it. So I don't understand the argument of denial from psychologists when it comes to happiness regarding life's situations, because running away from it is certainly not going to help you.
Right. So the idea is like, rather than like filling our lives with, the problem with filling our lives, at least one problem with filling our lives with constant activity, is that eventually we're going to slow down. Eventually we're going to get older, and we're not going to be able to go out there and play golf or tennis or just to work on our business, 60 hours a week, And so like, if we haven't learned to like face that free time, that time where we're just alone with our thoughts, and overcome those unpleasant feelings, in our youth, we're going to have to, face that challenge in our older age, and I'm not sure it's will be easier then. But yeah, the idea is that that if we're courageous enough, if we're wise enough to remain open to those negative feelings for the purpose of exploring them, for the purpose of resolving them to become happier, not just to explore them and experience them as a part of life's, whatever, then that will bring us great benefit, that we will be rewarded by that work.
In 15 seconds or 20 seconds, can you sort of sum up your feelings about openness and rejection by others?
Well, yes, other people are our main source of happiness, right? But, why do we spend not nearly as much time with other people as we could? Because, it doesn't have to just do with rejection, but a lot of times, we base, when we're, I can't do it in 15 seconds, but just basically we're afraid to be rejected by people. We don't have enough self-esteem.
Perfect. And I think happiness and self-esteem go together. So the heck with other people. So the heck with the fact that we're running out of time. But that's life. And, and that just goes more to show that happiness is what we need in self-approval. So forget about others. Take care of yourself. Stay happy. That's about all the time we have for you today. Thanks very much for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. Be good. Think well, feel very happy, and I hope we'll see you again next week on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful. It's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Let's be so very happy.